that way.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you for your apostolate. I had not heard about it, but I really appreciate, there's a lot of, obviously, men leaving the church and poorly formed men that are in the church. And there's this huge gulf between the great intellectual treasure of Catholicism and the average working guy. And there's a huge need there for sure.
Jason, welcome to the show.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
So, Jason, I know you have an interesting story. Tell me a little bit about your story.
Sure. I think, sadly, my story begins with what has become a pretty typical thing in America, which is semi-lapsed Protestant, divorced family, kind of bouncing in between two households that, one has a little more stable of a marriage, but it's not my mother, and the other one maybe a little less stable, but not my father. Just all the confusion and wounds and issues that come with the epidemic of divorce that's going on right now, and then confusion even within homes and families. I had a fun time in high school, but eventually I was pursued by a very strong and virtuous man, and he introduced me to the gospel, which, I grew up in the South, so the gospel is kind of everywhere and kind of nowhere at the same time. And so I had this idea of Jesus, Jesus is Lord, the Bible is important, all this stuff, but I had never really taken hold of the faith as my own. And as within my family, we maybe went every now and then, but I didn't belong to church.
Mm-hmm.
So I became a Protestant Christian and kind of late in high school. And that was kind of some fits and starts and stops and bumps along the way. But, progressively got more serious about my faith and grew in my love for God, really. And, but let's see, when I was about 20, 21, there was a kind of a series of events over a period of about 3 years that I became a Catholic. To summarize, I had kind of encountered what I would describe as the chaos within Protestantism. So we know that there's a lot of zeal and love amongst Protestants.
Absolutely.
And they're a great witness and a great challenge, really, to Catholic men. But at the same time, there's utter chaos, and kind of it boiled down to, with me, as with a lot of Protestants, which is wherever I am, there is the true church, so everyone kind of at the same time thinks everyone's right, but also thinks everyone's wrong. And I encountered some Catholic apologetics and some Catholic books and the church fathers. And a couple things happened. One, I read the church fathers because I thought, well, whatever they do, because they were like the first Christians, however they Christianed, that's what I'm going to do. And it was weird for me because they talked about bishops and the Eucharist and all sorts of weird things like that were not on my radar, and authority. It was just not something I considered. And then I also had a family member becoming Catholic, and I was interested in proving them wrong on why they should not become Catholic. And that didn't work out for me. But it was a big transition because I was a protesting Protestant. I was not unaware of the reasons of historical reasons of why Protestantism was there. I really thought Catholicism was a distortion of the gospel, and we needed to, in a sense, defeat the church. So I was, in the end, defeated. So now we've been a Catholic now for my wife and I. My wife was also we were both active in Protestant ministries together, and we both became Catholic about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. So
welcome home.
Yeah, thank you. It's good. Glad to be here. All the messes and craziness, I'm still happy to be here.
Well, the church has been challenged for 2,000 years, and things never change. But there is one thing that's very interesting is no matter what the challenges are in the church itself never sins, but the men inside it are sinners, and women inside it are sinners. But can you think of any other institution that would have gone through what the church has gone through and still been standing?
Yeah, well, I mean, just that reality itself. Blessed John Henry Newman, quoting scripture, he said, you know, there she is as an army terrible in array. You know, she's just there all throughout, no matter what happens. These things come and go, and there she is. And you've got to, at some point, reckon with that reality that, man, she's still there. So what Chesterton said, the church is like always about to fall over, knocked out in the fight, but never does. You know? So
the last institution standing, I guess.
Yeah, it's strange. Yeah, but no matter what we do, you and I, it's still, no matter how stupid and dumb we are.
we can mess up.
Yeah,
and we at least I do.
Yeah. Well, that's your problem, not me.
That's right. Hey, really, what I want to talk to you about is your new book that just came out. Entitled Leaving Boyhood Behind,
Sure.
subtitled Reclaiming Catholic Brotherhood. You had mentioned just earlier, Jason, that you had somebody that came into your life, sounded like a strong mentor.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the beginning of this. I mean, that book is a culmination of sort of 10 years of trying to figure out what's going on with men. You know, what's the problem? I think, obviously, we're in some sort of masculine identity crisis right now, and that's, I mean, everything from silly debates about toxic masculinity to, you know, the confusion that boys feel like, am I supposed to be kind of soft and effeminate and emotional, or am I supposed to, you know, because we kind of propose that to them. But right. At the same time, the heroes in the movies are still tough guys. So what exactly am I supposed to be? And then within my own story, just divorce and confusion about what fatherhood is, what being a man is. So it really, I mean, my story, my conversion to faith begins with a man sort of being fatherly and brotherly to me. But that, yeah, I would say my conversion began with, he came up to introduce himself to me. I was in high school. I was a cool guy, had plenty of friends, did not need another friend. He was an old guy with sweat in his armpits and eyeglasses and a lazy eye, and was nothing I wanted to be, you know. Mm-hmm. But he introduced himself to me. And I was very rude to him. And I said, I've got to go. It's my stepmother's birthday. You know, I'm out of here. And I didn't see him for like 3 months or something, just some long period of time. And the next time I saw him, he said, hey, Jason, how was your stepmother's birthday? And I know that seems silly, but that little bit of, you know, I lived in a world where all the men were, you know, we were friends, but we were somewhat competitive with one another. Everyone was out for themselves. And for him to remember my name, and I really felt like he saw me, like he was looking at me and seeing me. And again, I had plenty of friends. I didn't need to be seen, but I was seen in a different way. Mm-hmm. And then remember that small detail about my stepmother's birthday. You know, that's that was the beginning of my conversion, that he was already showing me a different kind of masculinity that I didn't know. And it turns out it's the masculinity revealed, you know, by Christ. So, yeah, that's where my story began, and I would say that's probably what eventually led to the, you know, the work that this book is. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Is there something that inspired you to write the book?
Well, like I said, people said, was this, you know, some sort of revelation you had or something? No, it's really a slow, simmering issue. I became a Catholic and got involved with Catholic youth ministry. But I found it was pretty cut and dry, especially with young men, that those that had strong fathers in the faith were strong in the faith, and those that did not have strong in the faith were not strong, and they were weak. And every faithful Catholic man I know, I can ask them the question, tell me about the men in your life that helped you to become a faithful Catholic man. And they can answer that question. Those that have left the church often can't answer it because they don't have those men in their life. So I kind of had a conversion, so to speak, about youth ministry itself, seeing, you know, if we just, sorry. Phone was ringing there. Maybe you can edit that out or not. It's fun. It's the reality. So basically, my conversion within youth ministry was sort of like, as a young youth director at a parish, I don't need to be using all my energy to reach all the kids myself and have these great programs and all this stuff. really, if we can transfer that energy to helping parents and especially fathers and other men in the parish to mentor the next generation, that works a lot better. So I started working with an apostolate called Fraternus, part of the founding of that, which basically the way that works is we just train men to do what they should be doing, which is mentor the next generation, you know, and help bring them into the faith. It's the most normal thing in the world. It's what cultures have done forever. It's nothing extravagant or new or gimmicky. So I've been doing that for about 10 years, and but in the midst of working with Fraternus, still being fascinated on like, but what's happened? Why are we having such a man problem in Western Christianity? Because it's not the world around, it's not all cultures, and it's not all parts of the church. It's really in the West. We're losing men and losing boys, and it's a related problem. So I went and got a master's degree trying to study this problem. It just kind of has been somewhat of an intellectual obsession. And finally, in the last few years, really diving into the theology and philosophy and anthropology of a rite of passage, you know, how boys grow up. And the original idea of the book title was How Boys Grow Up and Why Some Men Don't. And framing the problem with men is not just, it's not that they're just doing things wrong or that they're too violent or too passive or too this. It's that they're not growing up. You know, they haven't gone through a rite of passage where they're secured as men. And when that doesn't happen to them, they can't pass it on to boys. So the book is kind of this ongoing trying to understand, you know, if we're going to pinpoint the problem, how would we describe it? And I really think no matter what angle you're looking at the man problem we're facing today, it's a problem of maturity, of spiritual maturity, general maturity. And it's a cultural problem that we have broadly in the West, but we're feeling it deeply in the church. I mean, our own scandals are not just scandals of sex and money. I mean, they're scandals of our fathers betraying our trust, you know. So this is a problem we're facing. And I do think, not to propose this as an easy solution, but until we recover an understanding of rites of passage, we're going to continue this masculine identity crisis that's going on right now.
So what is a rite of passage?
Right.
About in the
That's
book.
the question. Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say it's not just sending your boys out to kill a lion. I mean, that's what, when we hear that, we think of these extravagant ceremonies or something we might have seen on the Discovery Channel, which is kind of the sensational part you see on TV. Sure. But the phrase rite of passage is an anthropological term, meaning it's the study of man. This is what men do. So the church would call this something akin to natural law. So there is a need within men and women to have transitions and initiations in their life. So rite of passage is a form of initiation. And it's where you have one state of life that you're leaving behind, and you're joining a new state of life. And the initiation is what makes the transition occur. So the only reason you need a rite of passage is when those two states of life can't be lived at the same time. They've got to be, you have to have a moment where you are no longer this and now you are this. The most obvious example most of us know is marriage. You cannot be a single man and a married man at the same time. You're either single or you're married. And the wedding and the marriage itself is what helps not only the individuals, the two people getting married, become married, you know, leave the single life behind and become married, but it's also the public recognition for the whole community that these people are no longer two individuals, but they're one flesh. So a rite of passage is the cultural means that a society or particular culture uses to help affect whatever transitions are necessary. So it's not just boys becoming men. It's things, birth, death, entering a tribe, leaving a tribe, getting married. There's all sorts of things that are technically a rite of passage. But to us, when we hear that phrase, our modern ears, we most often think of boys becoming men, because that's actually the most universal rite of passage. Like every society and culture throughout time has realized boys have to have a rite of passage. It's necessary. Not all girls have. Not all societies have them for girls. It's necessary, and it's sort of the most sensational because, you know, it's crazy ceremonies that are interesting to hear about. I mean, they're kind of fascinating. Like why exactly are those guys jumping off of a platform and banging their head into the sand 30 feet below? Like, what's the logic? And they're actually, so what the book is about is the logic of a rite of passage and why there's different stages of it and why our society is literally stopping rites of passage from occurring.
Use a term in the book, and I really like this phrase here. It's authentic manliness. What is authentic manliness, Jason?
Well, it's vague enough that I can define it anytime, anyway.
That's why I asked for your definition.
Well, okay, so I think people often say, well, manliness, that's not something we can define. That's, you just kind of have it or you don't, all this stuff, which is not true. Now, it's hard for us to understand this because we live in a globalized, media-saturated world. But let's go back, it's not one generation. Let's go back one, maybe two generations, and then all men before that. They would have known their local culture, right? They would have known what was out, Saint Therese did not discern the religious life and then tour different orders all around France. She was called to the religious life and went to the Carmelites next door. It's life was a bit simpler when you weren't connected to the whole world. And one of the things that's natural in manliness is that there are universal aspects of it. And in the book we go through these, and these are revealed and confirmed in Christ. We know these by our own natural reason. I mean, we see them. We naturally value the man that is heroic and sacrificial of himself for a greater cause over the man who's self-absorbed and a tyrant. I mean, we naturally, by our own reason and experience, prefer the hero over the, the passive wimp or the barbarian, right? And this is confirmed by Jesus. I mean, he shows us that the way of masculinity, so authentic, universally speaking, is to give yourself over for your bride, for something greater than yourself, something outside of yourself. So he confirms this by revelation, but we already know it. We already know this. He gives us just the ultimate and perfect model of masculinity. So an authentic man is sacrificial. He gives himself over. But at the same time, local places have had ways for men to do that. Local cultures have had ways for men to do that. And a rite of passage was always related to how do these local men live out this sacrificial masculinity. So, I brought up the go kill a lion as a tribal form of initiation. The relationship of that is, well, that's a hunting village. So they need to know how to hunt. And the lion is a threat to not only the village, but also those things that they hunt, sort of in competition with the lion. Now, obviously, living ecologically balanced, whatever. The reason they killed the lion is because it was related to how men exercised this call to be for the broader society, the broader, the tribe in that sense. In the West, traditionally, our forms of rite of passage were very often related to our work. So like in great American stories, like the Little Britches series or Little House on the Prairie series, the men in the American mind were those that worked hard for the sake of their homestead and their farm and their family. But they were never working hard for their own sake. It was always something related to one generation to the next. And then we also have wrapped into that things like apprenticeships and learning at the hands of your grandfather and your father and the other men. Those were the ways that we, in a sense, today, we're all sort of just oriented towards the global economy, and whoever can, we're all leaders and we're all potential millionaires and it's kind of disconnected from the idea of a local place and culture, but also the family itself. That we if we scratch the surface of our real thoughts, it's not we look at the man that has more money and success as successful, irregardless of what his the state of his family is. So all other societies would have seen an abject failure if your kids in the next generation of men are not becoming men with like previous generations, you got a problem. So for us Catholic men, we're hemorrhaging boys. I mean, they're just, the vocations crisis is because we have a boy crisis, and boy crisis because we have a man crisis. And we're not going to stop that until we recover a rite of passage. Now, it's not just that one big experience. It's not just the lion killing, as maybe you read in the book. I don't know how much you read. But, good, thank you. A lot of people want to talk about it. I'm like, you haven't read it.
No, I have a lot of notes. I got lines and things circled
all right.
place through the book.
Good.
And well, I do recommend picking up a copy of it if you haven't read it, guys.
Yeah, of course. Yes, multiple copies, and don't pass it on to your friends. Buy a new one. Yeah. So I guess, an important the challenge that I think though is worth bringing up is, and you saw in the book, is that there's 3 stages of a rite of passage.
Right.
And that middle stage is where that challenge, that lion killing aspect is. And I think that's actually the easiest challenge we face. The harder challenges are the other 2 issues, which is, the name of the book is Leaving Boyhood Behind. That basically we have invented adolescence in the West. Most societies would have brought an end to boyhood and an introduction to manhood as soon as possible. So and then on the other side of it is the integration, the incorporation into a body of men. So not only are we extending adolescence as far as possible, and just basically coddling boys and keeping them boys. The best students are the ones that act the least like boys. Normal, healthy boyhood is punished. And on the other side, we men were fractured, isolated, lonely. We literally have an epidemic of loneliness, suicide amongst men. So along with our work being disconnected and us being so wrapped up in it, we're totally alone in it. Even though we're all suffering from the same things, our isolation and our lack of a shared fraternal brotherly culture is literally killing us. So that's our bigger challenges with the rite of passage.
One of the things that's very interesting is the term, and we talked a little bit about this offline, is toxic masculinity, quote unquote, that we have out there today. I call it basically demasculization of men.
Right.
But yet, if we look out there, Jason, what are the most popular movies out there today?
Yeah.
They're superhero movies, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And you have to have this hero, and the hero, if it's the man being the hero, they're this Superman type of hero. So there seems to be just this 2 parallels out here, that we have this parallel here that's really popular, but yet men and boys are being told, oh, you don't want to act like this.
Right. Yeah, obviously we could find ways that masculinity can be poisoned and become, the abusive father is a great example.
Sure. Yeah.
However,
but as men, we don't agree with that either.
Yeah, that's right. But you're bringing up a really good point, which is it reveals itself, and it has a lot to do with money. Movie producers know that they've got to correspond to what people desire, what they'll pay for. And they won't pay to be sat down and told, you should not act like a hero. You should conform and be nice. Which is basically the best students in most elementary all the way up through college that are males are the ones that are nice and conformist. Get your head down, keep your head in the books. We don't actually want heroes. They're kind of uppity and disruptive. But then so that's an imposed, these are boys that are stuck in the classroom. They're being preached at all day. And that is the reason it's so constant, is because it's against their nature. To brainwash someone takes a lot of repetition, right? Whereas the classic story, the hero's journey, Luke Skywalker leaving his home to find, the evil of the universe and destroy the Death Star, that sells a lot of tickets because it speaks to something that's true. So when something is true, it's easy to to attach yourself to it. It's attractive. When something's not true, it has to be constantly repeated and beat and forced down your throat and beaten to your head, right? I mean, this is like, we literally, boys are totally normal, average boys. They show up to school, they get discipline and Ritalin, and the best students are the ones that act the most like girls. And, you know, all this, but then they go to the movie, and so I've got 6 kids. I just don't have time to go to the movies, but the last one I saw was one of the Jurassic Park remakes. And gosh, this was probably 5 years ago. This reveals or 4 years ago. I don't know. But I was cracking up because the hero, of course, they had, you know, the strong woman. You got to have that and everything. But the hero he rides a motorcycle, tames velociraptors, and, you know, saves everybody from an island of, you know, monsters. I mean, it's just, we would call it cliche, but the reality is the reason they have that hero in Hollywood is because that's what we men are actually called to be. Is heroic, sacrificial, greater causes, something above the superhero is supernatural. He's above what the normal is. So in a sense, he's nonconformist. I mean, he is bursting at the seams with power, which is what the man really wants to think, that when I leave the office and I take my glasses off, I'm Superman. I'm not the guy back in the office. You know, I'm not so anyway, telling boys, be good and be nice, does not speak to what they feel within themselves that they are. And that's true. They are something more. The last thing I want for my boys is for them to be nice. You know, I mean, and what I mean by that, you know what I mean by that. I mean, Corey, I want
what you mean by that. You want them to be respectful.
Yeah, kind, respectful, virtuous, but the niceties, to be nice used to be an insult. It was a word that was insulting. But it's literally one of the most repeated things we tell boys: be nice. Which is something akin to be passive. You know, and that's, nobody really wants that. Women aren't attracted to that. Men don't want to be that. But that's why we've got to keep repeating it. Yeah. Interesting paradox.
Well, it's kind of like, I can remember when my kids were young, and my boys, you know, boys always, they want to be challenged. A lot of girls do too, but the boys in particular, they're like, okay, the monkey bars, they're going to get on them and they're going to go when they're 3 years old, and they think they can conquer the world. Okay. And I think we do until we're like in our mid-20s, but the mom's going to go grab them off the monkey bars and be worried about their safety. And the dad's going to be like standing there to catch them if they fall.
Yeah, that's
just
right.
in case, but let them go.
Yeah.
And you talk a little bit about this in the book too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the mother, you know, when you're in the womb, you're in utopia. You know, you're never cold, you're never hot, you're never hungry, you're never thirsty. It's perfect. And then you come out and it's kind of traumatic. And the mother protects that vulnerable baby all the way through his boyhood. But there comes a time where he's got to stop being protected. So in a sense, he's got to reject and be severed from the world of the mother. And it is the father's duty, it's his role, it's his responsibility to bring him into the world of men and show him how the outside world works, how to endure pain. A mother literally can't do this. She naturally is a mama bear, which protects him from danger. Whereas the father, in a certain way, introduces him to danger. You know, that's what he's supposed to do. And the mother and the father are not wrong in this. There's just different. But when it's time for a boy to leave boyhood behind and become a man, that's why we traditionally have, you know, who in our culture, you know, cuts the umbilical cord, or when we say cut the apron strings.
It's the dad.
It's the dad. Yeah, he's the one who's got to learn to recognize, well, you know, it's time for him to learn how to take it on the chin a little bit. And this is not an abusive thing or a machismo thing, but it's a reality that to be sacrificial, to be priestly as men, you've got to be able to endure something that, you know, is outside of yourself, greater than yourself, bigger than yourself. And if you're surrounded in a world of women, which is, be careful, you can't do that. Don't do that. That's too dangerous. What boys really hear is, you're not man enough to do that. And this is why boys that are in homes with just mothers, fatherless homes, they're often more violent. So they tend to be either an extreme of passivity where they just say, okay, mom, I'll be nice, to the extremes of violence, so they're always trying to prove their masculinity because they weren't introduced to it. Like my favorite example, I wanted to put this in the book, but I couldn't get permission from various. I had Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash. All their songs tell this story of when I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy. Don't ever play with guns. So I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die. It's these lyrics, the relationship of violence and being kind of stuck to mom or not severed from mom. These are related things. So yeah, your boy's climbing the monkey bars. That's totally normal. The mom saying, be careful. That's totally normal. The dad say, come on, push a little harder. That's totally normal. This is all part of being human, but we're suppressing every aspect of that, especially with boys.
In the book, you talk about this. Today, we have so many broken homes where the mom is raising the boy or grandma might be raising the boy. Nothing against single moms or grandmas raising children, but you talk about it from the standpoint of these boys never have the opportunity to get that rite of passage because they're raised in a household of just women.
Yeah.
Leading the household.
Yeah. It won't. Well, and this is funny, in different feedbacks about this content in the books, one of the most potentially offensive things seems to be your mom can't make you a man. For a boy who loves his mother, who knows that the single mother, she's like, what are you talking about? She gave me everything. She's my treasure, which of course, like,
right.
Absolutely. She gave you everything and she is a hero.
Absolutely.
But she's not a man, which means she can't give masculinity. And my proposal is that masculinity is a gift you receive. She can give you everything. She can't give you that. And it's not her fault, but it can. It absolutely can. I mean, research and our own reason backs this up repeatedly, that boys need father figures in their life. So I come from a divorced home. It doesn't mean all hope is lost if you don't, if your father's gone. It does mean, however, because I work for an apostolate, I told you about, called Fraternis. We
right.
get called all the time from moms that say, my boy, he was great, 9, 10, 11, 12, but now 13, 14, 15, I don't know what's going on. He's rebelling, he's mad, he's angry, we're clashing. What do I do? And our advice is just always, you've got to find mentors for him. Oh, because they say there's no man around. What do I do? Find some men, because he's entering a time that's just not for you, So when our daughters, as they get older, they become more like their mothers. So in a sense, they grow into a friendship in their likeness. Boyhood is kind of associated with the feminine. I mean, that's why we say women and children. We don't say women, boys, and girls. It's women and children. But as a boy gets older and he becomes more man-like physically, hopefully in other ways, he's growing unlike his mother. So they might clash a little bit, which is why he needs to be with those that are, in a sense, like him. I mean, this is common. I was just reading, St. Paul, when he's writing to Titus, he says, hey, you teach the older men and teach the younger men, but have the older women teach the younger women how to be wives, mothers, all that stuff. And it makes total sense that St. Paul knows, I can teach, broadly speaking. I cannot teach someone how to be a woman. Mm-hmm. And a woman cannot teach a boy how to be a man, because she's not one. She can speak about it in the abstract, but not in a mentoring relationship, not in a come in and be like me, do as I do, because she's not a man. And God created us man and woman, and that's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with this. But so anyway, yeah, the single mother question comes up all the time, and it's just, no, single mothers are heroes. They've been abandoned very often, or abused, or worse, by men. But that doesn't mean that the boy should not become a real man. In order to break that cycle, he's got to be around real men. He's got to be around authentic, virtuous masculinity. Or perhaps he's going to be the cause of someone else in just a very similar situation, which is what happens. I mean, fatherlessness repeats itself very often.
In the book, you also talk about young men living at home, playing video games, and just not getting married. And we see that in our culture. If you go to Europe, you see it a lot as far as not getting married for a long time, a lot more today. Yeah. But this seems to be in our culture that we have these young men that play video games. They live at home till they're 30 or whatever. And then they put off marriage, which will eventually reduce our population, which some people would like. But from the standpoint, what do you see there, Jason?
Sure. Well, it's a failure to leave boyhood behind. We might call it failure to launch. We have all sorts of words for it, but it is a problem, especially for that man. So I live on a little farm. I have dairy cows. So we can't even, I got 6 kids. I can barely leave this place. Because as soon as I get done with work today, I got to milk the cows and then it's bedtime. And, I'm stuck. And what's interesting is the people who come to visit the most are young men that have total freedom. So they can go anywhere and be anything. And oftentimes what that means is they're playing video games and living at home and maybe going on a trip here and there. And they're actually drawn to this place, which seems to be the opposite of what the world proposes, which is, I'm totally stuck. I'm stuck, man. But milking cows and taking care of kids, but they see a happiness in that. They want to belong to something that's, bigger than them, that's hard, that requires their masculine strength. But they're 25, 28, 30 years old, and they're still boys. They're still living the same pattern of their boyhood. And, in the book we talk about, you've got to separate from the feminine. So the world of the mother, which is the domestic world, meaning you got to leave home. You got to have your adventures so that you understand your own strength. You've honed your own strength so that later you can be reintroduced to the feminine in the form of your wife, in the form of the domesticity where you're the husband, which husband means housebound, where you're bound to a home and giving yourself. But if you never separate, you keep living that way, it becomes harder and harder. And these, this land of perpetual discernment, and there's even solid Catholic guys that, I've been discerning the priesthood. I'm like, dude, you're 32. You're 35. You're actually not discerning anything. You're just really in love with doing whatever you want every day. And so it might look holy in some instances, or just some, to use in lack of better words, loser at home in the basement playing video games. But the fact is, he's not growing up. He's not facing the challenges. And of course, there's the paradox. It's like, but isn't he living the dream? He looks at porn all day, and if he wants to get a girlfriend, he gets a girl, he gets to play games all day. He doesn't have to pay a mortgage. Isn't that better? But ultimately, these guys are not happier. They're silly children you don't even want to be around. And the greatest men I know, the happiest men I know that have achieved much, they've achieved it through sacrifice, through they're heroes. They're not the guy living at home. So yeah, the failure to get married, the delaying of marriage, and we do it in the church. We talk about, no, you gotta go to school, you gotta get your career established, you gotta get yourself together, then go looking for a wife. I'm like, guys, listen, there's a reason that we're our most fertile in our early 20s, and same with women. That we're designed to be joined to our wife much younger. So in Scripture it says, in Genesis, and our Lord repeats it in the Gospels, for this reason a man must leave his father and mother, be cling to his wife, and the two become one flesh. It doesn't say a man must stay at home as long as possible, establish his career, and then find a convenient union with a woman that can help perpetuate his chosen lifestyle. It's like, no. You got it wrong. Your career is going to change, whatever, but you need to grow up, get married, and marriage is awesome, but if you live as a boy, the other challenge, I know a lot of people that have late marriages, and there's great blessings that come with it, but whoo, man, if you've been living by yourself or for yourself up into your 30s or 40s, and then you get married, it's real hard to change your ways and all of a sudden be one flesh with someone else, So a lot of those people, it's a big struggle. I was huge. I didn't know how big of a grace it was. My wife and I married so young she couldn't drink at our wedding. You know, she was 20. And it's the best decision I ever made. It was great. We've grown up together. I know how selfish I am. If I'd have been able to be selfish for 10 more years, do whatever I want for 10 more years, I and her, we would not be better off. You know, having to grow up sooner was better for me.
Your story there about, you know, becoming self-ingrained in your own habits and your own routines and doing those things. I've talked to men that are in their 40s and 50s and never got married. And they say, well, I was working on my career. I wanted to have this much money. I wanted to have my house. I wanted to have these bills paid off. I wanted to do this and this. And then the years just keep going by. And guess what? They end up never getting married.
Yeah. 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 It's funny. I just got an email today. I had written an article about the problem of perennial bachelorhood. And there was a man who was offended because he was in his face. I just never married. There might be a case where there's some guys out there that are just, you know, called to the single life in a strange, unique way. But Scripture's clear. It is, you know, right from when Adam's alone in the garden, God says, it is not good for man to be alone. You know, it's not good for us to be alone. It's good. If we're going to give ourselves to someone, that someone needs to be there. But you're right. I mean, my wife and I, we couldn't have children early in our marriage. We faced some infertility. And we went to a fertility doctor who was discovering, basically my wife had a disease that was stopping children. So we got that worked out, obviously, 6 kids later. But he said, you know, and this was a totally secular guy. Mm-hmm. He was not Catholic, but he said, yeah, I mean, his business, the reason he was so successful as an infertility clinic, he said all these women are having their careers first, and then they want to come in and have kids. He said biologically, it just doesn't work that way. They're missing their fertile years. And then they really, really regret it later. I mean, they really long for children and can't have them. And, you know, what a heavy cross. And obviously his job is to help them have children. And that's why, but he was saying very clearly, and he said to my wife, if you two weren't doing this now, by the time you're 30, you would not have children.
Right. My wife and I experienced the same thing. We had to have them really fast because the doctor's like, you've got a short time window here
that's right.
to have these kids.
Yeah, and crank them out. Yeah.
Like 4 within 5 years.
Yeah.
So I can appreciate your situation too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if the disease could come back, the best cure for it is pregnancy. So I guess we're keeping it going for now.
You know, one of the things, and you mentioned it too, Jason, is the pornography issue. Mm-hmm. So many young men today, rather than have a girlfriend, they have a phone friend.
Yeah. Well, you know, in Japan, they're actually having to develop coaches and businesses and government agencies that help boys actually desire women again, because the pornography has become so pervasive that they can avoid the challenges of a relationship altogether, but they're actually beginning to be not desirous of sex. So pornography, we think about it as a sexualization of everything, but it's almost stopping us, you know, because sex is from God and it's good and it reveals something. So by perverting it, firstly, and then saturating these young men in it, they're actually becoming where they don't desire a relationship, a sexual relationship with someone. I know that seems so strange to us, the older generations. It's like, but that is occurring. So the perversion of sexuality is actually coming full circle where, you know, St. Paul would say, let people marry so they don't burn with lust, you know, which shows a real understanding of human nature, which is kind of, I like St. Paul. But at the same time, now we're living in a time where people aren't even wanting that, because they have these substitutes. And that's another way that it keeps us, ironically, it's a perversion of adulthood, but that keeps us immature because, again, that porn star, she's a goddess. She's never emotional. She's never needy. She's always sexually ready. She is there totally for you whenever you want, right there on your phone. So it's, in the Odyssey, Odysseus is kept home. There's a goddess he runs into. He's stuck on an island. And she reminds him, your wife is immortal. I'm perfect. You can stay here forever. And that's in a certain sense what a porn star is today, is I'm perfect. A wife, a woman, they're emotional, needy. They got to eat every day. I'm a goddess. And but Odysseus has to break free of that in order to go where? Go back home, to reclaim his spot as a king. So this is an old temptation to want the goddess over the wife, but it still is debilitating for us men today. And, I work for an apostolate, and people have all sorts of statistics about how bad porn is. And I'd say, from my experience, it's such a universal problem. Every young man you meet, you should presume he's totally addicted to pornography. And I would say probably about 80 to 90% of the men you're meeting, you should presume they're totally addicted to pornography. So yeah, it's the problem we face. I mean, it's part of a bigger one, but yeah, it's and obviously if I'm saying we've got to separate from the feminine to be able to be integrated with our wives and our households in a healthy way, what could be worse than the porn, which keeps you in a sort of, I hate to even call porn sexualization. It's really the depiction of the brutalization of women by men. It might involve the genitals, but let's be blunt. It's a disgusting distortion of human sexuality. Absolutely. And so it's not, as St. John Paul II said, it's not that porn reveals too much. It reveals too little. It's such a counterfeit, but it's debilitating to men.
And it's one of the reasons that men are waiting to get married too, because they don't need that relationship because they have this.
I got my goddess.
Fake relationship.
I've got a goddess. Yeah, I've got a goddess. I don't need all the drama of a woman. Why do I want that? So
we have done a couple shows on pornography, and I'll put them in the show notes too, and some of the resources that we have for that, because it is a huge challenge amongst men today.
Yeah, and look, every man who's probably watching this, he knows the challenge. Go do these, be free from this. You've got to break these chains. So anybody who's listening to that, it's time today, right now. Call somebody. You need to get some help, and you're not the only one suffering. Welcome to being a man. But it's a battle for us to fight.
So Jason, what else would you like to share with the men?
Well, I would say if maybe in this podcast or whatever reason you're listening to a Catholic guy podcast, you must be showing some sort of desire to grow closer to God, to grow more virtuous. And that's a grace that you're responding to. So thank God for that. A lot of guys out there, I've been involved with men's groups and stuff, and they go, man, I wish somebody would have told me this when I was 15. I would have screwed up a lot less. My biggest hope and prayer for men, and kind of part of the reasons of writing this book, is that there's a lot of boys out there that are in a more confusing and damaging world than you are in. And it is your duty, responsibility, and job to make sure that those men know what authentic masculinity is. And there is no one else that's going to help a Catholic boy become a Catholic man besides a Catholic man. So don't leave that to youth groups. Don't leave that to professionals, to anyone. It belongs to you. So that's my passion with the work with Fraternis, is that there's a lot of boys out there that are going to be worse off than we are if we as Catholic men don't get our act together, have brotherhood amongst ourselves, and then invite those boys into that. So thank God for your conversion, and pass it on so we don't have any other people screwed up as us, right?
So how do you get the book?
Sure. Well, of course, you can go to Amazon and help Jeff Bezos build rocket ships and divorce his wife. Or you can go to stjosephsfarm.com and buy it from me and my family and help me pay my power bill. You can get it from any other online retailer, Barnes and Noble, all those. Our Sunday Visitor is the publisher. They obviously carry it. So, hey, if you want to buy now and get it Amazon Prime, I don't care. Go for it. But go ahead and grab it and send me a note and what your thoughts are, and I appreciate it all.
So, Jason, one last question. Your last name is Craig.
Yes.
I like bourbon.
Normally people start with that interview question. Yeah.
This is the fun part.
That's
so
right.
Elijah Craig, I do like Elijah Craig.
It's good. Yeah, it's true. So I was at a family thing, and my aunt, who's kind of a post-Puritan Methodist, sort of with her head low, said, yeah, by the way, your ancestor invented bourbon. At this point, I was Catholic, and my ears perked up quite a bit. And yeah, as the story goes, he was the first one to put whiskey in a barrel that he had accidentally caught on fire and go ahead and ship it. And Elijah Craig was actually an illegal Baptist preacher in basically Anglican Virginia, my understanding. So back in the day, we talk about the land of the free, but religion was actually pretty highly regulated in some of the early colonies. And so he was an illegal preacher that made bourbon. So if you don't like that story, I don't know what to tell you, because that's just almost too good to be true. So and he was, I am in fact a descendant of Elijah Craig. So you're welcome.